Do you think it's a better scenario that citizens are being defenselessly run over by tanks from their government as opposed to a civil war scenario where they fight back? So because they're completely defenseless right now and they're getting bazookaed to high heaven, you think they should have no way to defend themselves? Top 5 lessons learned from Venezuela. Let me ask you this. What have you learned most from the story unfolding in Venezuela? Everyone's been talking about Barr. This has been a little lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
Nothing surprising.
No,
exactly.
they've really taught us a lot. So obviously they've reached a boiling point, right?
Yeah.
The citizens have been staging massive demonstrations against the dictator Maduro. And by the way, how do you pronounce the name of the legitimate president?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
Well, I know. Is
Trump.
Is it? We'll just say Juan. His last name is very hard for me to pronounce properly. Juan. President Juan. Gaudo? I don't know.
Not gonna work here.
But anyway, there have been demonstrations going on, obviously against dictator Maduro, who is not recognized. So Juan, the other guy, recognized as the interim president by both the United States. This is important to note, and other nations. Actually, I think we have a clip and a freeze here to show you what's going on. We just froze it. We can't show it because they've been running over dissidents with tanks. And Maduro is, for people who haven't been following, let me give you a brief kind of history lesson. He's a socialist turned dictator, but I repeat myself.
Is that better?
Slaughtering civilians. And this is what's so important. People say, well, no, this is an example of pure socialism, okay? The most tragic thing here is that it is entirely predictable. This isn't the first time this kind of a government has run people over with tanks.
No.
And before you say that it's not true socialism, let me walk you through the top lessons we've learned as to why it is. Lesson number 5, by the way, is that democratic socialists are going to hate lessons 4 through 1. Hit the notification bell,
and the
bookmark the page, join up at Mug Club, by the way, because we're hitting, everything's demonetized now. Of course, subscribe on iTunes. So the 4th lesson that I think is most important here is that socialism doesn't work. And I know this is a lot of people say, well, this isn't, no, hold on a second. We're not talking about places like Venezuela. Actually, do you know how I know Bernie Sanders and celebrities have long praised Venezuela and other South American socialist countries. They did it when their economies seemed to work.
Way back in, 1961, they invaded Cuba. And everybody was totally convinced that Castro was the worst guy in the world, that all the Cuban people were going to rise up in rebellion against Fidel Castro. They had forgot that he educated their kids, gave them health care, totally transformed the society. You know, it's funny, sometimes American journalists talk about how bad a country is because people are lining up for food. That's a good thing. In other countries, people don't line up for food.
But
the rich get the food and
difference.
the poor starve to death.
He doesn't his view is skewed because there's no lineup in the prune juice aisle. By the way, when people argue that it's not real, do you know how I know that it's not true? Still today, okay? Bernie still has an article on his website today, right now, that claims Venezuelans are living the American dream better than those in the United States. Today, right now. And I guarantee you, after this show, they'll probably wait 2 weeks until this blows over and then remove it, and then you can time machine go back to today, right now, this Thursday. What's the date?
May 2nd.
Thursday, May
2nd still says on Bernie Sanders' website, official website, that Venezuelans are living the American dream.
Is that lining up for toilet paper and having to eat dogs because you're starving to death? I don't remember that being the American dream.
The idea, you cannot simply say it's not real socialism because it doesn't work now. You praised it. Bernie still praises it. This is what you wanted. It's what you got. It's over. You're done. Screw your attempted pivot to Denmark. They don't want you. By the way, Maduro was elected. And if you say it was a special election because Chavez died, fine. So did Chavez was elected. You asked for the scales were tipped a little bit by endorsements from one Jeff Spicoli and Bernie Sanders. Still pretty fair and free. Sorry, leftists, you can't blame this on corrupt leaders.
No.
When your system, this is what the system of socialism is what grants them unbridled power in the first place.
Exactly.
The fact that a socialist turns into a dictator because you created the sole environment where he can become an all-powerful dictator is your fault.
Yes.
And we already did a video debunking John Oliver's lies, specifically on Venezuela, why it failed. You can watch it on the channel. But let me give you kind of a brief summary for people who don't understand. They try and say, well, it's about the economy. No, okay. Venezuela, most oil-rich country in the world. One of them, more so than Saudi Arabia. A lot of people don't know this. Chavez
huge reserves.
Had the state run the oil industry instead of investing it back into the oil industry, investing profits
or
back.
in the economy to grow other sectors.
They used it to pay for a ton of socialist programs. That's why people liked them for a while, creating a bubble that burst when the oil market didn't do that well. So when people say it's all about oil, no. What was a road bump for the capitalist economies was an absolute disaster for Venezuela. And so before these protests, this is what's important to note. Right now, you see them being run over with tanks and shot by their government. It seems severe. But before this, they were starving. They were digging through trash for food.
Yeah.
Freddy Mata says it is the only way he can eat.
At least we have not died of hunger.
While he dislikes having to do this, he says he finds food that is edible.
So socialism doesn't just kill people by running them down with tanks or shit. It starves them first.
Yeah.
Third one here this is important, and I don't want to be simplistic, so let me back this up. Gun rights are necessary for a free society.
Essential.
So here you can see someone on MSNBC actually admitting that Venezuelans are completely powerless because they don't have gun rights.
You have to understand in Venezuela, gun ownership is not something that is open to everybody. So if the military have the guns,
Why does that matter?
they have the power. And as long as Nicolas Maduro controls the military, he controls the country.
Uh-oh, did I just say that out loud?
That would never happen here, though. Come on. That would never happen here.
Was that Tucker Carlson in a fat suit?
How did that make air?
And here's the thing. I know what people are going to say. People have been saying this nonstop on social media. Like, it's what they call the reverse nirvana fallacy. I think they call it that in either rhetoric, logic, or philosophy. It's hard to know which is taught in college. I remember I learned about this in college. The idea that. Well, hold on a second. If they had guns, do you think it would fix the problem here? The government has tanks. Okay, hold on a second. So let's, before we get into the statistics, let me ask you this. Do you think it's a better scenario that citizens are being defenselessly run over by tanks from their government as opposed to a civil war scenario where they fight back? So because they're completely defenseless right now and they're getting bazookaed to high heaven, you think they should have no way to defend themselves? I don't understand the argument. And by the way, it's also incorrect. With an unarmed population, Maduro is barely hanging on to power. Okay? If you dump 300 million guns into the mix, he'd be through.
Yeah, they're just beating with rocks and bottles right now. Can you imagine if they were armed in any way?
This is the idea. Is like, well, they would just nuke. Well, no. There's a ground war that needs to be fought, and right now they are fighting without guns. And the Second Amendment is designed specifically. This is where people miss it when they talk about it being hunting. I know I sound like a broken record, but it's designed specifically to prevent this kind of government from even attempting this sort of tyranny.
Oh, but that would never happen here.
Yeah, that's the next argument. It would never happen here. So let's just make sure that we have no fail-safe. Take the United States, for example. If you look at the numbers, we have a population of 320-something million people. Okay, we have 300-something million guns. I think it's over 30%. Oh yeah, too cute, Maddie has the overlay. It is. It's over 30% of households who own guns. Our total military population is just over 2 million. That's including active and reserve personnel.
Yeah.
There's no chance of the United States gunning down its people because they know the citizenry is so armed. It cannot happen. And if you think, you think that genocide is better in Venezuela than a civil war, I need to hear your argument when you say that guns in the hands of civilians wouldn't help. I just don't agree. Just like we have a historical precedent for all socialist, Marxist, communist governments doing this, do we have any kind of a precedent for armed populations fighting people? Well, Switzerland weren't invaded during World War II, and I know some of you will say, well, they had a geographical advantage because of the mountainous regions. Okay, but you know what? Let's use another example. Direct quote from Japanese military. When they were asked why they didn't invade the United States after Pearl Harbor, said, there would have been a gun behind every blade of grass. By the way, Japanese, very flowery. What's your excuse, Hirono? Don't you think I know how to do poetry? Give me credit. I give you no credit.
None whatsoever.
This is what's so important. It's so predictable. There's nothing unique about Venezuela. It would be, if you could find an exception, all big government and socialist leaders disarm their citizens.
Yes.
Soviet Union, Cuba, Nazi Germany. So socialism, disarmament is the rule, not the exception. Well, lesson number 2, this one is kind of an aside, but I wanted to include it, is we learned that Trump isn't a Russian stooge.
Oh, really?
My important one, though, so this is really simple. Putin has supported Maduro openly and repeatedly. Yeah. Maduro was actually readying a plane, did you know that, to escape to Cuba?
Yeah, he was out. He was done.
Before the Russians convinced him not to. And
I don't know how.
Back in January, Trump issued a statement officially recognizing one other guy, however you pronounce it, one other guy,
one last name,
as the interim president of Venezuela.
Guaido.
And by the way, it's also important to note that Russia's had cozy relations with Cuba, and if you look at Donald Trump and Bolton and their not only their sanctions but their rhetoric on Cuba, again, this just backs it up. But if you don't believe me, and I don't think you should believe me. You should never
hold your feet to the fire.
Don't believe me. Believe your lying eyes and believe your lying ears. Here's President Trump meeting with one other guy's wife, telling her that her husband is 100% the president. When asked about Russia, by the way, he couldn't be more clear.
We are with Venezuela. We are with your husband, as you know, and we're with the people that he represents, which is a big big majority of the country.
Here it comes.
What sort of complications does the Russian involvement now pose?
Russia has to get out.
What?
All right, what's your next question?
Someone's in the Kremlin's pocket.
Whoa! That's awesome.
What do you think about Russia? Scrub. Okay. All right.
get out.
Like, it couldn't be more forceful. Not only does socialism not work, but the macro really works. Socialism is outright evil, and I've talked about this many times.
Yes.
It's not compassionate.
No.
Maduro's army, they're running people down in the streets, shooting them.
Yeah.
This is where socialism always ends. How is there any question as to this being pure evil? Venezuela, again, it's not an outlier.
Nope.
For the 20th century, socialist, Marxist regimes have killed over 100 million people. Tell that to your edgy atheist friend who talks about all religions being fought in the name, all wars being fought in the name of religion.
BS.
And I don't understand. Please answer me. How is this a surprise to anyone? If only we had the literal exact comparison of a Marxist out-of-control government running over dissidents with tanks in the history books. Is it possible?
Somewhere, maybe.
You starting to get the picture? And this is the issue. We have to go to Senator Rand Paul in a little bit. Socialism, it starts with, it can only function with an entirely powerless and entirely defenseless society. The two are different things. When I say powerless, I mean people who are reliant on the government for their health care, reliant on the government for their education, reliant on the government for their welfare, for their ability to live. You suck the soul straight from somebody's body. And when I talk about defenseless, I'm talking about systematic disarmament. And one, of course, precedes the other. This is one thing, too, that you can't, I think Thomas Sowell talked about this. You can't blame the leaders who seize control that you have willingly given to them. At some point, maybe it was democratic, but guess what? At some point, it's not going to be. Let's not say Bernie Sanders is a Maduro. I don't think he would be. Maybe not the next guy, but it could be the next guy and the next guy and the next guy, and you're too far in because you're dependent on the government based on these policies because you thought you were getting a gimme. And let me something else here that I think is important to note. Capitalism is not flawless. No one here is arguing that. Free enterprise, of course, has its problems. But if I'm wrong, and this is the issue, the idea of dispersing power, of it not being centralized. If I'm wrong and Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos are corrupt and they become like Maduro's, you know what? Thousands of people lose their jobs. The economy's going to do pretty poorly. Yeah, it'll be catastrophic economically for a lot of people. If you're wrong, people get starved and run over with tanks. So if you're going to take the lesser of two evils, let me know what you pick. Hey there, if you like this video, subscribe or click one of these videos playing in a box. You know what? Hit the notification bell because subscriptions don't really mean anything anymore, especially if you're not 18 or older, at the very least, logged into YouTube as 18 or older, because sometimes people are 25, but they don't know how to use the YouTube system properly, and then just hit the notification bell or you hate yourself.